Well, hi everyone, it's Mike from Lanzarote Information with another hopefully useful video for you. And this week I'm answering the question that was posed to me by a reader, which is why are Spanish names so long and how do they work? So we're going to cover that off for you in a moment, but I thought I would start off by talking about titles because that is a little bit different here in Spain to what you may be used to. Now, the obvious ones, Mr. and Mrs., Señor and Señora, are probably ones you all know. So if people were wanting to address me as Mr. Cliff, they would say, Buenos dias, Señor Cliff. And in the same way, if they were saying the same thing to Julie, they would call her Senora Cliff. So that's how Mr. and Mrs. works. In Spain, we also have Señorita, which is the equivalent to Miss. We don't have an equivalent to that sort of MS, which is used quite a lot in the rest of the Western world to denote someone who doesn't want it to be known whether they are or are not married. So we really only have Señor, Señora and Señorita. And as I say, you probably know how that works already. But where we do have something a bit different is the use of Don and Doña. And you would use those rather than Señor or Señora if you wanted to give respect to someone. So it might be someone who's a bit older than you, it might be someone in an influential position, in which case you would use those titles rather than Señor and Señora. But there's a big difference in the way you use Don and Doña, and that is that they work with the Christian name, not with the last name. So, for example, when I walk into the bank and the junior teller says hello to me, they always address me as Don Michael. So that's using my first name. So I would be Señor Cliff, but if they choose to, they will call me Don Michael. And in the same way, Julie would be Doña Julie, Doña Julie. Now, it remains in very common use. I mean, I'm quite often referred to as Don Michael, I think because I'm old now. But, you know, I would always use it as a sign of respect. When I run into my friend, the notary, I would always say hello to him as Don Pedro. On the odd occasion I run into or speak to the president of the Cabildo, I would always call him Don Oswaldo, como estás, Don Oswaldo. So you would always use those as a sign of respect to anyone. And typically when you walk into a hotel, they will welcome you as Don y Doña. So that's how titles work. I promised that we would talk about names though, so let's explain those. And the first thing to understand is that when a child is born here in Spain, they take their parents' first surnames. Okay, so let me just backpedal a moment. When a couple gets married here, they both keep their two surnames. They don't. The lady doesn't change her name to the man's name. So if a young lady is born with the surname Smith-Jones, she will be Smith-Jones for the rest of her life. And when they have a child and the baby is born, they will take the first surname from the father and the first surname from the mother and put the two together. So if John Smith and Mary Jones have a baby, the baby will take the name Smith-Jones. And the effect that has is to perpetuate names that they just keep going. I mean, for example, you'll see a lot of similar names here in the Canaries that go back generations. Cabrera is a common one. You see Cabrera all over the island. Betancourt is yet another one. And that baby that is given the surnames Smith-Jones when they are born will keep them for life, as I say. But when people are introducing themselves to you, they rarely use both of their surnames. They will typically be known as with the first one. So if the baby's name is Elizabeth Smith-Jones, she will be known to everyone if they're talking about her as Elizabeth Smith. And if she introduces herself to you, she will typically just say, "My name is Elizabeth Smith, nice to meet you." And unlike the way it's done in many Northern European countries, those two surnames are not hyphenated, so they are just literally two separate surnames. Now, I said that Elizabeth Smith would introduce herself in that way. Certainly, she would do in social surroundings, and if she was phoning someone to order something up, or whatever. But in any formal situation, she would use her two surnames. So if, for example, she was arriving at the traffic office to apply for a new driver's license, she would give her name as Elizabeth Smith Jones. So in summary on surnames, everyone has two. They are taken from the first surnames of their parents. They don't hyphenate it, and they typically use the first one in social surroundings, but they'll always use the two together in formal situations or where they are being asked to provide information about who they are to an authority. So that's all fairly straightforward. Now let's talk about first names. The Spanish typically have two first names, but not always, so that's exactly the same as it works for most of us in Northern Europe. For example, my parents gave me the two first names of Michael Julian. And in that scenario, Spanish people will have, for example, Juan Pedro. So those are two separate first names that they've been given by their parents. Now, in my case, hardly anyone knows my second name is Julian. I very, very rarely use it. I certainly would never introduce myself to anyone as Michael Julian. And in the same way, Juan Pedro would always introduce himself as Juan. And, he would use his first name and his first surname. So if his name is Juan Pedro Cabrera Eugenio, he would just say, "Hi, I'm Juan Cabrera." And in the same way, if I meet you in a social situation, which I guess I'm doing on these videos, I only ever introduce myself as Mike. I never call myself Michael Julian. In fact, the only person who ever really used my full name of Michael together with Julian was my mum. And when she did, I knew I was in big, big trouble. But there is a different scenario with Spanish first names, and this is where it really diverts from what most of us are used to in Northern Europe, because the Spanish can have a hyphenated first name. I'll give you a couple of examples. The first is a former accountant of ours. His name was Jose Luis, with a hyphen between the Jose and the Luis. And our lawyer, who we've worked with for many, many years, a lovely lady, her name is Maria Jose. So she has a hyphen between the Maria and the Jose. Now, in that case, you always use both names together. So I would never say to Maria, "Buenos dias, Maria." I would always say, "Buenos dias, Maria Jose." And the same with Jose Luis. I would always call him Jose Luis, because when you see a hyphen, it means both names have to be used together all the time. So I hope that answers the question for our original reader. We've summed up how surnames work. We've summed up how first names work. Putting the whole thing together to get that long name, you could, for example, speak to our lawyer and her name is Maria Jose Perez Calero. So it's a lot of names, but I guess I'm as bad because I have 4 names as well. Now I thought I'd just finish up with some interesting nicknames that are used in Spain, and I'm just going to open my iPad because I can't memorize all of these. I'm going to read them off my iPad for you. But there are a lot of first names are shortened, and people are given nicknames in Spain just as they are everywhere else in the world. I mean, for example, I'm Mike, but really my name is Michael. And I like some of the Spanish ones, so I thought I'd share this list with you. And the first of them is Magdalena, and Magdalena often becomes Magda. Alejandro becomes Sandro. Antonio becomes Tony. Yolanda becomes Yoli. Eva becomes Evita. And this you'll probably know from the Andrew Lloyd Webber Tim Rice musical all about Eva Perón, because that was called Evita. And Eva Perón was known by her close friends as Evita. Fernando becomes Nando, so if Fernando Alonso meets his friends, I'm sure they all call him Nando. Ignacio becomes Nacho, And there are a lot of nachos on this island, so if you ever wondered why they're called nacho, it's nothing to do with the crisps you can eat, it's a shortening of their name Ignacio. Jose often becomes Pepe. I have no idea why that happens, but Jose is often Pepe. Ricardo becomes Ricky, Mercedes becomes Merce, Margarita becomes Marga, and finally Manolo becomes Lolo. So you'll hear Nachos and Lolos and Tonys and Yollies while you're out and about, and now you know what their nicknames are short for. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope that's answered the question of our original questioner. If you've got any questions yourself about this video or about Lanzarote in general, just pop them in a comment below. I read every single comment on here, and I will always endeavour to get the answer for you and or reply. If you've liked this video, please give us a like, it really helps the channel. And if you haven't already subscribed, hit the subscribe button. We produce 3 videos every week about the island you and I absolutely love, and that's this one here. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. We'll be back again with another video on Thursday and then on Saturday. Bye for now. Bye.